What is up, everybody? We're back. Core Use Bloody History. Continuing on Jack Ruby Files Part 4. So let's rock and roll. Regarding background information previously set forth, furnished by Chicago informant reflecting one Tomaselli, Tomaselli, phonetic deputy, so knows Ruby well. On 11/25 last, Sheriff Richard B. Ogilvie, Cook County, SO, 118 North Clark, Chicago, advised S.A. Vernon E. Jossie. Files of that agency contain no records of Tomaselli. However, records located reflected James Tomasello, 1029 North Ridgeway, Chicago, previously employed from 10/152 to 3/15/63. And James Tomasetti, 1031 South Almond Street, Chicago, previously employed from 42 to 43. On 11/26/63, James Tomasello, 1029 North Ridgeway, Chicago, and on 11/27/63, James Tomasetti, presently residing 3135 Dora Franklin Park, both advised S.A. Jossie that they do not know Jack Ruby or Jack Rubenstein and can furnish no further information. All right, next one, 11/29/63. Reference Jack Ruby, Lee Harvey Oswald, etc. Reed Dallas, TT to numerous SACs, November 28 last. And Detroit TT to Director in Dallas, November 28 last. Entitled, quote, Assassination of President Kennedy, Dallas, Texas, November 22 last, end quote. Interview of Curtis Laverne Crawford, as set forth in Reed Detroit. It was conducted by S.A. Theodore S. Kramer. The following investigation was conducted by S.A. Jack G. Wilson at Detroit, Michigan, on November 29, 1963. All right. Redacted advised the records of the Michigan Bell Telephone Company, 1365 Cass Avenue, revealed that Detroit telephone number on 3-4400 and UN 3-5590 are the published and unpublished numbers, respectively, for Cobo Cleaners, 18135 Livernois, Detroit, which service established in October 26, 1961 for both numbers. Cobo Cleaners is operated by Earl Ruby, brother of Jack Ruby. So that's an interesting document. It mentions both Larry Crawford and Earl Ruby in the same memo. The Southfield, Michigan telephone number, L6-0919, was issued to Earl Ruby, 1935 9 West 11 Mile Road, Southfield. This service was established during September 1962 and was discontinued on October 16, 1963. Earl Ruby then obtained phone number 353-2730 at his new residence, 29925 Woodland Drive, Southfield. The above information cannot be made public except upon the issuance of a subpoena ducis tecum, issued to the commercial manager, Michigan Bell Telephone Company, 1365 Cass Avenue, Detroit 26, Michigan. The following investigation was conducted by I.C. Gerald J. Jazz on November 29, 1963. The records of the Detroit and Southfield police departments and the Wayne County Sheriff's Office failed to contain any record for Cobo Cleaners or Earl Ruby. 3 records of Merchants Credits Bureau and Dun & Bradstreet. Both Detroit revealed Cobo Cleaners and Earl Ruby possess excellent credit ratings. These records fail to contain any derogatory information or detrimental legal information. Jack Leon Ruby, a.k.a. Jack Rubenstein. Lee Harvey Oswald, a.k.a. victim, deceased. Reed Dallas Teletype, 11/28/63. Birth record check, Jack Ruby. On November 29, 63, I.C. Francis G. Call personally checked the birth records at the Bureau of Vital Statistics, Chicago, Illinois, in an effort to verify the birth of Jack Ruby or Jack Rubenstein or Leon Ruby or Leon Rubenstein in Chicago on March 25, 1911, March 19, 1911, or May 15, 1911. Records Bureau of Vital Statistics negative. Mr. Thomas Lanick, Bureau of Vital Statistics, advised I.C. Call, K-A-H-L, that the Chicago PD and the newspapers at Chicago had previously attempted to verify Ruby's birth date, also with negative results. Mr. Lanick advised that prior to 1915, It was not mandatory to record births at the Bureau of Vital Statistics in Illinois, and it is possible that Ruby's birth had never been recorded. That's fucking wild, isn't it? All right. So here we got a memo reference Ralph Paul. Now, I might be fucking crazy. Call me crazy. But I did some research on Ralph Paul. Turns out his real name is Ralph Paul John. That's the conclusion that I came to. The girls who worked at Austin's Barbecue called him Johnny. Okay? Ralph Paul's nickname was Johnny. And then I find an obituary for a Ralph Paul John. However, I can't seem to find my screenshots or the actual obituary itself. So if Jim and the guys in the chat can pull anything you can on Ralph Paul John from Dallas, living in Dallas, Texas, I'd very much appreciate it, because I need to get to the bottom of this to make sure that I'm not just fucking crazy, which is always a possibility. On November 27 and 28 last, Lieutenant Andrew Voto and Sergeant Frank Averso, Lodi, and JPD advised that they have no record for Louis Paul, stated Paul resides NYC. Specific address unknown, attempts to contact anyone at Personal Finance Company, Lodi, New Jersey, on above dates unsuccessful. On November 29, instant, Frank DeLuca, manager, Pleasant Finance Company, advised that Louis Paul is president of Instant Company, but gets to New Jersey at infrequent intervals. Stated Louis Paul resides 2121 Cedar Avenue, Bronx, New York. Telephone number, blah, blah, blah. Then it says, no info identifiable in Newark files for Ralph Paul, a.k.a. or Louis Paul. So just to clarify, when you have an FBI file and it says, like, it'll say, like, Jack Ruby, comma, a.k.a., comma, Lee Harvey Oswald. Or in this case, it says Ralph Paul, comma, a.k.a., period, end of sentence. They're saying that there's nothing identifiable for Ralph Paul or his known aliases, right? So whenever they have AKA, that they're giving alternate names that they're checking on. So they obviously have something. Louis Paul, obviously a relative here. Next one, heading's the same. Jack Leon Ruby, a.k.a. Lee Harvey Oswald, a.k.a. victim. So a lot of people get confused on that AKA, because Jack Leon Ruby's AKA is not Lee Harvey Oswald. They're just laying him out in a single heading. Confirming Washington Field Office telephone call number 25 Instant Bureau in Chicago. Anonymous caller telephonically contacted Washington Field Office 1:10 p.m. This date stated Jack Rubenstein's brother, the one from Detroit, is in Washington, D.C., is heavily armed and, quote, may try to kill someone, the attorney general or somebody. End quote. Caller heard above info in conversation 3 fellow employers at Pontiac Division of General Motors in Pontiac, Michigan. Stated Rubenstein's brother also works in this plant. Anonymous caller was talking to 3 fellow employees mentioned above about subject's killing of Oswald and what a terrible thing it was. And an unidentified member of this group told him to, quote, don't talk about the Rubensteins or you'll get yourself shot in the back. End quote. Anonymous caller stated FBI should send undercover man into the Pontiac Division plant to talk to Negro workers who, if they were not afraid to tell the truth, could tell of the underground connections of Rubenstein's brother and the mafia. That's interesting. That seems to reckon screenshot. Secret Service and MPD advised by Washington Field Office, Chicago and Detroit requested to ascertain whereabouts of subject's brother, Earl Rubenstein of Detroit. You notice you'll never see any references to Samuel Ruby in any of this stuff at all. All right. FAA Springfield, Illinois advised it's been brought to their attention person named Wacha McCullum, who operates Smoke Riding 8T6 aircraft, Danville, Illinois, has been in Houston, Texas to work for the Fair Play for Cuba Committee when late President Kennedy was speaking that city. Stated McCullum offered some of $1,200 by Fair Play for Cuba Committee to do skywriting in Dallas, Texas on November 22 last. Efforts being made to locate and interview McCullum. Re. Full details this incident to identify persons making contact and if subject or victim known to him. For information, Dallas, all gambling informants contacted Springfield office with negative results regarding Ruby. All right. Next one is same thing. Jack Leon Ruby, Lee Harvey Oswald. Tampa teletype, November 26 last, and Chicago teletype, November 26 last. Background of Jack Ruby. Public Sources Credit Bureau's directory is negative for Lou Graverman, Graverman, Miami, and Mickey Thames, Thames, Fort Lauderdale. No Thames building known to be in Fort Lauderdale. Quote, Miami Herald, unquote, November 27 instant carries article by John McDonald, former employee of Jack Ruby in Dallas. McDonald interviewed today by S.A. Robert K. Lewis. McDonald is employed aboard the motor vessel Pilot 1. Says worked for Ruby as a maitre d' when Ruby opened the Sovereign Club in Dallas. Quit after 2 months because of low pay. Describes Ruby as miserably headstrong and capable of any action to attain his own goals. Says Ruby once engaged in a fist fight with Joe Peterson, who was producing shows at the Sovereign. McDonald has no information concerning Ruby's background, associates, membership in any organization, or acquaintance with police officers. Does not know Oswald. Never heard of him prior to November 22 last. Oh, this is an interesting one. Herminio Diaz Garcia, 127 Northwest 13th Avenue, Miami, former head of security at Hotel Riviera, Havana, today advised his wife was former telephone operator in the Riviera and recalls Ruby as having been a guest there prior to 1962. Neither Garcia nor his wife acquainted with Ruby. Okay, so I have to acknowledge I made a mistake on something. On Fresh and Fit, somebody made a comment about Herminio Diaz, and I thought Herminio Diaz died in 62 before the assassination. Turns out he didn't die till 66. But there's a lot of speculation that he was involved in the Kennedy assassination, but for no reason at all. Well, the only reason is that the name Diaz only appears in the assassination one time, and it appears on the flight from New Orleans to Montreal. The last name Diaz, along with Lambert, and I forget the other one offhand, but that Diaz was Sergio Arcacha using Diaz as an alias. That is the only indication that there's a Diaz anywhere involved in the assassination literature at all, period. So the rumors of Herminio Diaz being involved in the assassination, to me, is just more urban legend, more myth, because I can't connect him with, well, I mean, he's connected to David Ferry, and he knew some people, but I can't put him in Dallas. I don't really have any room for any extra people at this point. Well, maybe a couple, like the black guy standing in Dealey Plaza in the seconds after the assassination, when you got everybody running and the guys with all the cameras there. There's a black guy with like some kind of hat on and a suit. Like, I don't know who the fuck that is. No idea at all. There's a couple people I have no fucking idea who they are who are in Dealey Plaza. So there's some room, but as far as shooters go, I don't really think so. All right, Mrs. John Sullivan, Boca Raton, Florida, telephonically contacted Miami office, advising she was at Miami International Airport November 17 last and observed a man boarding 1:30 p.m. Eastern Airlines flight to Dallas. Believes this man resembles Ruby. Miami assumes Ruby was in Dallas at the time and taking no action unless they advised to the contrary. Okay, let me think this through. 17th, way before the assassination in Miami. I have no way to confirm nor deny this. Let me screenshot that, because that might be important at some point in putting together an accurate timeline of Jack Ruby. All right, read Jack Rubenstein from Chicago visiting Muncie, Indiana. Looks like attempt to locate Max Hiller, IRS agent, and Rex Jelly, Muncie, Indiana. This date unproductive. Preliminary investigation reveals Rex Jelly no longer in Muncie, Indiana. Investigation continuing. All right, next one. Dated 11/29. Re-Butel call to Washington field office, 11/29/63. Information was received by the Bureau night of 11/27/63 that Ruby's Army record had been received at the Pentagon and would be available for review 11/29/63. By contacting a Colonel Furbish, Code 11, extension 75131, room 2E757, for more information of the Washington field office while this file was reviewed by the St. Louis office, that Ruby's Army file may be obtained in order that photographs of same may be taken for retention in Bureau files. It should be noted that Ruby's Army serial number was ASN 366666107. Let me screenshot that because I have a feeling I might want to, do some research into that serial number. All right. November 30th, 63. Jack Ruby, Lee Harvey Oswald, etc. Reference Bureau Tel to Atlanta, et al., November 30, 63. Mr. Blaney Mac Johnson, Atlanta. Recontacted this date by S.A. Daniel D. Doyle, advises that on the basis of viewing subject's photograph and knowledge that Jack Rubenstein has described originally resided in Chicago, Illinois, he's convinced beyond reasonable doubt that the latter is identical with subject. For information of Miami, Johnson names Clifton T. Bose Jr., formerly Captain National Airlines Miami, as possibly having been acquainted with Rubenstein and his activities. Records Federal Penitentiary, Atlanta, reflect no Donald Edward Browder. One Eddie Browder, formerly incarcerated on liquor violation, released 1960. Inasmuch as Johnson states Donald Edward Browder, formerly active in illegal liquor market, Atlanta, will determine if identical with Eddie Browder upon availability of complete U.S. penitentiary records, December 263. Miami locate and interview Clifton T. Bose Jr. to determine if Rubenstein identical with individual known to him as set forth by Johnson. If identical, ascertain full details, reassociates activities, background, etc. Next one, reference Atlanta Tel, November 19. Last, concerning info from Blaney Mac Johnson, Miami City Directory for 49 lists a Playbrook Club, 225 Northeast 79th Street, not listed for any other year. Noted Colonial Inn, former gambling house at Hollandale, Florida, closed in the early 40s. Named Carlos Prio is probably reference to Carlos Prio, former Cuban president overthrown by Batista in 52. While there were flights of weapons to Cuba in the early 50s, noted Castro organization not active until about 56. I can't read the first name. Something T. Lewis, 261 East 37th Hialeah, was interviewed today by S.A. Robert K. Lewis. He stated that he advised he never heard of Jack Ruby or Rubenstein and has no knowledge whatsoever of persons flying weapons to Cuba. States he does not know a Donald Edward Browder nor a Joe Mars, M-A-R-R-S. Investigation Miami developed that Joseph G. Mars, former Eastern Airlines pilot until 43, redacted, now resides Lake Placid, Florida. Miami will locate and interview Mars. Correction, PG 1 line 1, subjects named Lee Harvey Oswald. All right. FBI document to Mr. Belmont from Mr. Rosen. Assassination of the president. At 4:20 p.m., SAC Shanklin of the Dallas office was telephonically contacted concerning items he plans to send to the Bureau this evening. Shanklin advised these items are as follows: a still photograph of Lee Harvey Oswald holding a rifle with a telescopic sight and wearing a pistol in his belt. 2, a copy of the television film showing Jack Leon Ruby shooting Oswald on 11/24/63. Shanklin advised the above material will be brought to Washington, D.C. in the personal custody of the captain of Braniff Airlines, flight number 110. Shanklin did not know the name of the airline captain. The flight will arrive at National Airport at 7:30 p.m. this date. Action at 4:30 p.m. today. S.A. George R. Tucker of the Washington field office was furnished the above information. S.A. Tucker was instructed to have an agent meet the above flight and obtain the photograph and film. The agent will then bring these items to room 5710 at the Bureau. All right, 11/25/63. Butel, Chicago and Dallas, 11/24 last. Regarding questioning Jack Rubenstein, connection and shooting of Leon Cook, files of the Chicago office reflect the following. Chicago Daily Tribune of December 9, 1939, carried an article stating that John Martin, president of the Scrap Iron and Junk Handlers Union, Local 20467, AF of L, had shot Leon R. Cook, the attorney for the above union. According to Redacted, who was interviewed at that time, the informant was then in the process of forming a rival union affiliated with the CIO and had written several letters to junk dealers in this regard, which he had signed Cook. Martin learned of these letters, assumed he was being double-crossed by Leon Cook, and during an argument between Martin and Cook, which ensued, Martin shot Leon Cook. Martin then became a fugitive from justice. Maury Kahn, C-A-H-N, 20 East Delaware, Chicago, advised S.A. Robert L. Buckingham on 11/20/4/63 that he is a former associate of Ruby. Both he and Ruby used to double date. Kahn could not recall Ruby ever being associated with the union, nor could he recall Ruby being connected in any way with the shooting. Kahn advised that the name of Leon Cook was unfamiliar to him. Kahn added that all the people he knew, Ruby was the least likely to be associated with violence. You notice how, going back to the 40s, all these people who knew Jack Ruby, some said he was a hothead, got in fights. Others said he was no way associated with violence. Interesting, huh? Almost like they're describing two different people. Kahn recalled that Ruby at one time worked for his uncle in approximately 1934 or 1936 in a clothing store located near Halsted Street and Roosevelt Road in Chicago. After this employment, he sold premium items, that is, such things as razor blades, etc. Kahn used to see Ruby regularly, as both would attend the fights at Marigold Garden, Chicago, every Monday night. Kahn advised that Harold Ryan, member Illinois State Boxing Commission, Ira Kolitz, owner of the Clover Bar, and Louis Schnitz were friends of Ruby. In fact, the last time Kahn saw Ruby was at the Clover Bar about 5 years ago. Ruby at the time was interested in booking an entertainer and was inquiring of Kolitz and Kahn from whom he could contact in New York. Paul Dorfman, former head of Above Union, is quoted in IRVKL, quote, Chicago Sun-Times, unquote, dated November 25, 63, as advising Ruby worked as an organizer of the union for a short period, but was unsatisfactory. Joe Jacobs, labor attorney and attorney for Local 20467 Scrap Iron and Junk Handlers Union, until 5 years ago, advised SAC Leonard Treverinus on November 24, 1963, that he does not know Ruby, nor does he recall his being associated with the union during late 30s or early 40s. An extensive search of the records of Chicago Police Department did not reflect any reference to John Martin, Jack Ruby, or Jack Rubenstein, or to murder of Leon Cook. Irvin Schoenwald, former boxing promoter, 131 West Randolph, Chicago, advised S.A. John R. Bassett on November 25, 1963, that Harold Ryan, who is believed to be working for the Illinois State Athletic Commission, is currently on a cruise and will visit Europe. He's expected to return to Chicago in December 1963. Ryan has telephone number Merrimack 7-1254. This number is listed to Naomi Ryan, 1704 North Melvina, Chicago. Schoenwald did not know Jack Ruby, Sparky, or Jack Rubenstein. SAS Petros A. Katsos and John E. Dahlman attempted on November 25, 1963 to contact Ryan through telephone number ME 7-1254 with negative results. Art Winch, W-I-N-C-H, member Illinois State Athletic Commission, 160 North LaSalle Street, Chicago, advised S.A. Katsos on November 25, 1963, that Harold Ryan is no longer with the commission. Ryan was an office administrator for over 10 years and was left out when the political administration of the state of Illinois changed approximately 2 years ago. Ryan is currently employed with the Metropolitan Sanitary District, Chicago, which had no knowledge or information regarding subject Ruby. Mr. Ted Laffren, guard, Metropolitan Sanitary District 100 East Erie, Chicago, advised S.A. Dahlman on November 25, 1963, that Mr. Harold Ryan, secretary to Mr. Mahoney, who was in charge of construction there, was presently on a Mediterranean cruise and would not return to Chicago until about December 1st, 1963. He could furnish no additional information. On November 25, November 25, 1963, redacted, Chicago Tribune Morgue, 435 North Michigan Avenue, Chicago, advised S.A. Bryce S. Plesner that a check of their records reflects an article stating that Leon R. Cook died on January 5, 1940. He resided at 1135 South Sacramento and was the founder of the Iron and Junk Handlers Union, even though he held no office with said union. On December 8, 1939, Cook went to the office of the Iron and Junk Handlers Union, 3159 South Roosevelt, and while talking to John Martin, president of this local, was shot as a result of an argument involving amount of pay given to union members. The article points out that Cook went to the hospital under his own power and gave a statement to the effect that while talking with Martin, he had complained that the union members were not receiving adequate salaries, and Martin became angry and pulled a gun and shot him. The article pointed out that Martin resided at 8023 South Wolcott, Chicago, and that after Cook's death, Martin and his secretary, Mrs. Gladys Walsh, 35409 Walnut, Hinsdale, Illinois, could not be located. The article stated that they subsequently did appear at the police station and that in the trial, Martin maintained that he shot Cook in self-defense, as it was Cook who had the gun at the time he appeared at Martin's home on December 8, 1939. Mrs. Walsh testified that she saw the two men arguing and struggling, but could not see who had the gun or how it was fired. This article states that much of the information about this matter was received from Jack Rubenstein on December 9, 1939. Rubenstein, secretary of this union, stated that he was only a collector for the union. And redacted stated that a second article reflected that on January 16, 1940, Union President John Martin was freed of the charge of murdering Leon Cook. Stated that no other information is available concerning this matter. Interesting. On November 25, 1963, Louis E. Schnitz, 2270 Garrison, Evanston, Illinois, advised S.A. Johnny Dahlman that he does not know Jack Ruby or those allegedly associated with him. Schnitz stated that he had a cousin named Louis Schnitz, 10104 Whiten Drive, Weston, California, who might know Ruby. Los Angeles contacted Louis Schnitz, Westwood, California, determined his knowledge concerning Ruby and Associates. If Schnitz acquainted with Ruby, L.A. should immediately advise Chicago office in order they can discontinue efforts to contact other persons with similar names. Chicago office recontacting Kahn for additional information he may possess concerning Ruby and Associates. Chicago office will also continue efforts to contact Ira Kolitz for information concerning subject. We'll also continue efforts to contact Ira Kolitz for information concerning subject as well. All right, so next one. This one's dated 11/25, so there's kind of not really any particular rhyme or reason to the order, except it's early after the assassination. Actually, all the Jack Ruby stuff should be after November 24, right? So November 24, 25, 26. The following investigation was conducted at Milwaukee, Wisconsin, by S.A. Richard Thompson. On November 25, 63, Boyd Gorton, Bureau of Identification, Milwaukee PD, stated that he could locate no arrest record for subject under his true name or known aliases. Gorton also advised that Joseph Marvin Krasno, Krasno, born October 20, 1899 or 1900, has been arrested 12 times between 1921 and 51, and that 7 of these arrests were as keeper or inmate of a gambling house. However, none of the records reflected the names of his associates, and all the reports made out by arresting officers prior to 1955 have been destroyed. Records made available by Gorton disclosed Krasno arrested as follows. God, there's a whole list of dates here. We don't even know why they're important yet. Except the guy's been arrested for a lot of gambling violations. On November 25, 63, Emil Zortz, Deputy Sheriff, and Lieutenant Patrick Lynch, Milwaukee County SO, stated that they could locate no arrest record for subject under his true name or known aliases. November 25, 63, Joseph Krasno, proprietor of the Highland House Bar and Restaurant, stated he had read the newspaper accounts and seen a newspaper picture of the subject, but did not recall him. Krasno also stated that he had no recollection of ever being arrested with the subject. He said that his last conviction relative to gambling occurred in 1933, verified through records, but he did not recall a subject being arrested with him at that time or at any other time. For the information of Chicago, Dallas, Las Vegas, Joseph Krasno and Lou Simon were notorious gamblers in Milwaukee until about 15 years ago. Simon is alleged to have gone to Las Vegas, but Krasno remained in Milwaukee. Gambling informants contacted up to the present time have furnished no information of value, but contacts are continuing. All right. Rebutel all offices today. All SE gambling informants contacted with negative results. Ruby. Tacoma, Washington, who furnished info on Settle yesterday. Joe Young, a.k.a. Jack Ruby, re-interviewed today. She now says further TV photos of subject Ruby show little similarity with man she knew as Joe Young. And she furnished info only because of similarity of names. Info not being reported. All right, next one. On November 25, 1963, Mr. Harry Thomas, 705 Arizona Street, El Paso, Texas, advised he was associated with the Associated Press in Chicago in the early 1930s and resided for a time at the Olympic Hotel, 1016 North Clark Street. The hotel was operated by a man named Rubenstein, who used various first names, mainly Harry, Jack, and Abe. Rubenstein had a violent temper and was seen beating up an unidentified individual on one occasion. Rubenstein reportedly was part owner of a number of nightclubs up and down Clark Street, including McGovern's Liberty Inn, and was reportedly tied in tightly with the rackets in Chicago. Mr. Thomas said he did not know if the above-mentioned Rubenstein was identical with the man who shot Lee Harvey Oswald in Dallas. Gerald Wolfe, owner of Ramada Inn in El Paso, as well as a chain of restaurants, was introduced to subject 2 years ago in Dallas by Harmon Shepp, S-C-H-E-P-P-E, owner Shepp's Dairy, Dallas, but has no further contact with subject. On November 24 last, Wolfe was telephonically contacted by Shepp and reminded of meeting subject. Wolfe said Shepp is personal friend and business associate of subject and is in a position to furnish extensive info re-subject. No leads being set out for Chicago. Dallas requested to interview Shepp re-subject. Butel this date instructed all offices contact gambling informants re-subject. Gambling informants in El Paso division contacted with negative results except for following info. On November 25, 63, PCI redacted, theatrical booking agent El Paso, Texas, who has furnished reliable information in the past and whose identity should be protected, advised that the subject was known by most theatrical agents to use exotic dancers. In February 62, Redacted talked to the subject over the telephone concerning the employment of Beth King, exotic dancer who was looking for work. The subject talked in a very pleasant manner, but did not employ Beth King in view of the fact that he did not have an opening for her. Redacted said he had no additional contacts with the subject and no personal knowledge of the subject's background and associates. Redacted said the subject was never known to spend any time in El Paso. All right, 11/26/63. Info received from former SA Harold Sell today. That info had been received from him, or by him, from one William Schenk, S-C-H-E-N-K, a book salesman for Burnett Smith Publications, who had informed him that he has a brother, Donald C. Schenk, 5018 Bowser Street, Apartment D in Dallas. Schenk is presently a senior medical student affiliated with Parkland Hospital. Last night, Schenk called his family in Chicago and was most distraught. He advised stories are circulating at the Parkland Hospital that the Dallas PD telephonically contacted the Parkland Hospital to put them on alert prior to the time that Oswald was taken from his cell. The hospital was reportedly alerted to the possibility that there may be trouble. Schenk requested his brother Donald C. Schenk be discreetly contacted so as to not jeopardize his position as a senior medical student affiliated with the Parkland Hospital. That's pretty wild, huh? $11.27. Remerad, November 25 last. Background: today's essays J. Sterling Adams and Hardy L. Albrecht interviewed Mrs. Lorraine Jordan, stage name Cleopatra, exotic dancer, who reported the following. Cleopatra, employed as featured exotic dancer, Colony Club, adjacent to Carousel Club, Dallas, 2 weeks early August. Last had frequent contact with Ruby as a patron of his club. Described Ruby as very nice and gentlemanly person with good reputation among other dancers, and doubted veracity of news reports concerning his bragging about dating strippers at his nightclub. Ruby never observed drinking nor involved in any reprehensible conduct. You see, once again, we have completely contradictory descriptions of Jack Ruby. Jordan has observed photograph of victim local press, but states no such person observed in Carousel or Colony clubs with Ruby. Dallas PD uniformed officers occasionally visited Carousel and Colony clubs. One, first name unknown, Anderson, described as tall patrolman, married with residence in Garland, Texas, in Carousel Club on several occasions, but no irregular relation known with Ruby. Jordan suggested Gail Raven, well acquainted with Ruby, who has worked in his club numerous times, and one Jada, redhead exotic, also past employee, well acquainted with Ruby. Sources for additional data, both may be located through Jack Cole, AGVA agent in Dallas. November 26th. Jack Ruby, a.k.a. Lee Harvey Oswald, etc. San Francisco, Tell to Los Angeles, November 26th. Sam Gordon, 755 Crescent Drive, Palm Springs, California. Owner of restaurants in Sacramento and San Francisco with office address 1626 J Street, Sacramento, advised on November 26th instant as follows. Gordon in 1931 met Jack Rubenstein, a.k.a. Sparky, working around the baseball park, Chicago, where they were both selling novelties and scalping tickets to the games. Sparky lived with his parents, names and addresses not recalled. Sparky and Gordon double dated and went to dances together. Gordon could not recall the names of any of their associates. In 1935, Gordon moved to San Francisco, where he ran into Sparky. They renewed their friendship. Sparky lived with his sister, Eva, last name unknown, at a cheap apartment house, address not recalled. Gordon recalled seeing Eva but did not know her associates or employment. Sparky was employed as a door-to-door daily newspaper subscription solicitor. Sparky returned to Chicago in 1940, and Gordon has not seen or heard from him since. Gordon has never been in Dallas and does not know of any associates there. Sparky, during the time he knew Gordon, never exhibited any extremist or radical views, never carried a gun, was not mixed up in any illegal activity, never exhibited any particular interest in political activity, and never started any arguments or fights, even though he was quite good. Cousin Mac Paul, address unknown, employed grocery clerk in the Bronx. Paul states formerly married to one Beatrice Scholl, 1931, now remarried, name address unknown, but residing in Manhattan. Paul admits hold 50% stock in S&R Inc., Texas Corporation of Carousel Club. This is obviously Ralph Paul. Dallas indices negative on Paul and relatives. Sidney A. Davis, Records Administrative Section, INS NYC, on 11/29 instant, advised that check of INS records, New York City, failed to reflect record of Ralph Paul, a.k.a. Raphael Paul, or his parents, Samuel Paul and Tilly Paul. Davis pointed out that all INS records involving naturalization or derivative citizenship prior to 4156 are now located INS Central Office in Washington. New York is checking records of U.S. District Court, SDNY, and EDNY in effort to locate naturalization records of parents of Paul. Washington Field Office review INS Central Office files, and if record located for Ralph Paul or his parents, advise NYO date and place where naturalization of parents or derivative citizenship granted to Paul. All right. 1126, reference background, Ben K., associate of the Rubenstein family. On November 26, 1963, Ben K., K-A-Y, a former Chicago policeman and president of the Rogers Park Ford Agency, was contacted by S.A. Robert Malone and August C. Kempf. K advised that he knew Jack Rubenstein casually in the late 1930s as a person in his neighborhood. Ruby was known to K to frequent the Lawndale Pool Room and other neighborhood hangouts in the vicinity of Roosevelt and Lawndale Avenue. K has not seen Ruby, nor had any personal contact with him since he left Chicago in approximately 1947. But he's had contact with the Chicago members of the Rubenstein family. Harold Kaminsky, a brother-in-law of Jack Ruby, is employed by Kay as an auditor on a one-day-a-month basis. Other members of the Rubenstein family have been introduced as automobile purchasers. In the late 1930s, Ruby was known to Kay as a scalper and a hustler who was always looking to, quote, make a buck. Kay did not know Ruby to be a member of any hate group, subversive organization, or member of the Chicago hoodlum element. Kay stated that to the best of his knowledge, Ruby was not connected. Prior to departing the Chicago area, Jack Ruby was in business with Earl Rubenstein, his brother. Jack and Earl had a falling out over business matters, resulting in Jack's divorcing himself from the business and leaving Chicago area. Jack Ruby presumably traveled to the West Coast and remained there. Kay's not had any personal contact with him, Jack Ruby, since his departure, but has been advised concerning him by members of the family. According to Kay, Earl Rubenstein was confined to the Hines Veterans Hospital, Chicago, for a 1-week period approximately a year ago. He was hospitalized due to a suicide threat. Jack's sister, Mrs. Kaminsky, made a trip to Dallas, Texas on a returning trip to Chicago, remarked to Kay about the preferential treatment afforded her by the Dallas Police Department. She mentioned that due to her relationship with Jack Ruby, she was met at the airplane by the Dallas police and given the VIP treatment throughout her stay in Dallas. Kay stated that Lou Graverman, a former Chicago car dealer and tire dealer, was a close associate of Jack Ruby. Graverman, according to Kay, had hoodlum ties and can be furnished details of Jack Ruby's connection with the Scrap Iron and Junk Handlers Union with which Ruby was associated. Graverman is now in the Miami, Florida area and is in the automobile business. Kay could not state whether this was a new or used car automobile business. The Miami division is requested to locate and penetratively interview Lou Graverman concerning his knowledge of Jack Ruby. All right. Well, that's what we're going to call it here for today. And I appreciate your tuning in, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow. Thank you.